Okay, so this is the third lesson, and we will entitle it "The Acquisition of Knowledge." I think in your guys' sharing, I think you guys are right on track with what the author is intending here. Why did the author seem to write so knowingly and so intimately? Again, we've got to keep in mind that she is somebody who has been raised from a very intellectual perspective. Her mom was a revolutionary writer. Her father was very insightful writer. And so she has a lot of understanding of what it would mean to acquire knowledge and what that looks like. And at this time, it was culturally, a lot of what was going on, again, was this pursuit of like science and trying to figure things out. And particularly within the human body. It was kind of at this time where people began to experiment. And so this is why it would have been a horror back then, because a lot of people felt like we shouldn't even be offering tests at all. Yeah, like this really could happen. This is like really a fearful thing. And so before we jump in too much or get too far ahead of ourselves, we want to remember that last week we talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so this is going to be important thematically for us as we frame out who Victor actually is. And so we see in chapters 1 and 2, right, his upbringing, his family life. What was his relationship like with his parents? Good? Bad?
I'd say good.
Scale 1 to 10, what do we think?
Somewhat good. 6 or 7.
6 or 7? Yeah. Yeah, so by all intents and purposes, we see that Victor's life was pretty good. In fact, he alludes to this a couple of times. He writes, and again, he's writing because he's the narrator at this point in time, right? He says this: "My mother's tender caresses and my father's smile of benevolent pleasure while regarding me are my first recollections." So the very first thing that he can think of are his mother's tender caresses, his father's smile. And so that those are things that are meant to anchor you to this relationship that he has with his family. Now, this is really critical and important, right? We talked about this a little bit last week, right? That when our foundational needs are met, and first our foundational needs, meaning our physiological needs, right? Like water, food, those sorts of things. And then we have safety, security, shelter. But that primary one right in the middle that we're really going to focus on is love and belonging. Does it sound like Victor is provided with love and belonging? Yeah, absolutely. It seems like there's a real anchor for him. Continuing here, and just another, right at the start of chapter 2 here, a little bit further down, it says, "No human being could have passed a happier childhood than myself." Now that's saying a whole lot, right? Again, what are the purposes of chapter 1 and chapter 2? Because they're giving us, when Victor's telling the story, right, to Walton, he's going all the way back to the beginning of his life. Does that seem a little odd? Did anyone catch that? Mm-hmm. You're recounting a story of what happened and how he got to the ship. And he says, well, let me frame the narrative here again for you. Let me give you some perspective of who I was. And Hannah pointed out a little bit that this kind of offers some insight on why the acquisition of knowledge and why he's going to be warning Walton again and again and again was so critical. Because what Victor's trying to get us to do and to see is a time when his life was perfect. He had no need of anything. He was content, right? His needs were met. No human being could have passed a happier childhood than myself. My parents were possessed by the very spirit of kindness and indulgence. We felt that we were not the tyrants to rule our lot according to their caprice, but the agents and creators of all the many delights which we enjoyed. When I mingled with our families, I distinctly discerned how peculiarly fortunate my lot was, and gratitude assisted the development of filial love, family love. My temper, and this is, again, a nugget that has been placed here by the author. My temper was sometimes violent, and my passions vehement. Now, he's going to allude to some things in his heart, even though he had this idyllic sense of what it meant to grow up, and his parents were really stable and sound, and there's affection there, and there's love there, and there's a recollection of the very first things being these really centering, grounding experiences. He identifies that there's still within his heart this dissonance, this struggle that he has. And that he has a temper, right? And he has a temper because, it says here, his passions are vehement. Now, this was something that, again, alludes to kind of the framing of the time, that Gothic kind of mindset of, or even kind of coming out of some of that Greek thought, right? That our emotions are just permitted to give room and to have it out. Like there's permission there to feel all of these feelings. And not meaning just feel them, like, okay, that's what this is, but to let them explode onto the scene. They're not harnessed. They're not brought in. And so we see now the author is juxtaposing two different things. Perfect, ideal childhood. But there's a crack. We don't know why, we don't know how, but there's a crack in the foundation. And so what the author then will allude to is ultimately this idea of kind of the breaking away of Victor from his family came at the hands of what?
Death of his mother.
Death of his mom. Yeah. This begins to radically affect who he is, right? Because again, remembering our hierarchy of needs, right? When there are foundational cracks, right? When all of a sudden you don't feel safe, secure, loved. And sometimes it doesn't mean, I think his mom loved him. Sometimes it doesn't even mean that people stop loving you. Sometimes they no longer exist. And so you ask the question, I wonder this, and I wonder, like doubt sets in. And so these cracks begin to form in the foundation because relationally things shifted. And that's important for us to consider here. Because at the heart of the story, it is a story about relationship. Relational. And so when that foundation cracked, he began to kind of now to appeal to his own mind and think, I'm going to do something, I'm going to make something. And so think of it this way. And this is where Mary Shelley's personal life, why it feels so real to her, or real, like she knows who Victor was. In her own life, what did she experience with her mother? Her mom died giving birth to her, right? And so she can relate to this character in the sense that it's somebody that lost their mother. But we also know that after she wrote this, she had lost children of her own. And so imagine, if you will, kind of even creating this fictional character that is able to do the unthinkable, which is to reanimate life. Now this goes beyond just a pursuit, an acquisition of knowledge, but there's almost kind of this desire in there to change the course of circumstances of life. Now this is borne out in Victor's life, certainly. And so we see that Victor begins to pursue knowledge as kind of the end goal. And that really is the problem. It's not necessarily the pursuit of knowledge here that's problematic. It's the acquisition of it. And what's the difference? Is it okay to gain knowledge? Sure. But what happens when you get it? Right? This is alluded to in that little clip from Jurassic Park, right? You know, all of this stuff, you've never asked the question. You've said, can we do this? But you never asked the question, should we? Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do it. That's the problem with knowledge, is that when people obtain something, they think then it's somehow theirs. He alluded to that in the clip as well, right? Like you gained this. You didn't come up with it yourself. You're just building off of what somebody else did. And you're so proud to think that that's something that you possess, that you can then do something with. See, there's kind of this flippant nature to the whole pursuit of knowledge and ultimately the acquisition of knowledge. But I would say this, it is the acquisition or the pursuit of knowledge is dangerous when it lacks two things. First, and that's the question, could, should, ethical boundaries. Is this ethical? Should I do this? Is this actually a benefit? What could be the drawbacks? What could be the hindrances? What could go wrong here? Again, we see that Victor has no care in the world for any outcome other than glory, other than this thing should go well. Now, again, this is mirrored in the life of Walton, right? Walton in the first 4 letters is pursuing glory. Victor here is pursuing what? Glory. This breakthrough for humanity. But there's not a ethical consideration here. He hasn't asked himself, just because it might be possible for me to create life, doesn't mean that it's a benefit. He maybe didn't even ask himself, what would be the benefit of creating this reanimating life? What could we really do with that? And maybe it's not such a nefarious thing, right? Like maybe he's not thinking like really coming from a bad place in his heart, but maybe he's considering like, if we are able to bring back people to life, maybe my mom didn't have to die when she died. And so again, what the author wants us to do here, if we're really mindful of it, is we want to see him as both a sympathetic character, like I understand why he could do that, but we also kind of want to go, but he's not really a bad guy because he might want to do this for these really good reasons, but he's not really thinking this through. He hasn't really considered or counted the cost here. But I would say even more importantly than the ethical boundaries is this: relational. You see, what we're about ready to find out here, right, is has he actually given consideration to what he's going to do with the thing he creates? How is he going to react, respond to that person? It's ambition that blinds Victor from asking the difference, could or should. That's ethical. And it's the prioritizing of knowledge over relationships. That's the relationship problem, right? He had a healthy family. He had an affection for his father. But there was a breaking away, was there not? I think it even alludes to that in one of the chapters, how he kind of broke away from his father's understanding or his father's desires. In fact, I don't think his dad was really all that pleased with his pursuit of galvanism and these kind of sciences. Remember, his dad kind of nudges him and says, maybe you should go a different direction. And Victor blows right through that without giving it a second thought. One of the reasons why we encourage you guys here, all of us encourage you guys here to talk to your parents, to have dialogue with your dad, to seek your dad's wisdom. In fact, some of you, when you're deciding on things, that was some of the clear counsel that was given, is what does your dad have to say about that? It's not because we're trying to elevate, merely just elevate a person, but there is a spiritual nature to which that wisdom that is handed down relationally is really significant, right? There's a lot of people in your life that have gone before you and have insight and understanding that you maybe don't have. But the relational connection to your father and mother makes it all the more important about what you're learning, what you're understanding, and what you're coming to. Because your mom and your dad, right? They have the perfect context of an investment in your life that wants to lead you to a healthy arena. And other people don't have necessarily that same investment level, right? And so we see that Victor separates himself out of kind of the relationships with family. This is going to be a theme that's played on throughout the book. It's kind of him becoming a little bit lost apart. There's no one that he has to relate to. Now you guys have highlighted this, but let's turn to page 54 and we're going to read through it again. Because this absolutely is an anchoring set of principles that we're going to really want to lean into. It says, learn from me. This chapter 4. 54, it's just a couple pages into it. Learn from me, if not by my precepts, at least by my example. Again, who's he talking to here? Walton. But who is he talking to in extension to Walton? She's talking to us as the readers, right? So we want to put ourselves in this position of reading it as if, understanding it as if somebody was narrating to us. How dangerous is the acquirement of knowledge, and how much happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world. And so Victor here is saying, it's so much better that you just concern yourself with your native town, the community in which you are raised. That's so much better for you. All of the things that that are out there in the world, that's such, the acquisition of all of that understanding, experience, whatever, is so harmful to you. And it seems so foreign to us because we have access to the entire world in our fingertips, and devices that we carry in our pockets. And we take those things for granted. And sometimes we don't realize that the very place relationally that we have been put, it is our salvation in many ways from the difficulties of this life. The man, happier that man is who believes his native town to be the world than he who aspires to become greater than his nature will allow. Now this is somebody who is speaking with hindsight, right? Frankenstein is at the end of his life recounting where everything went wrong. When I found so astonishing a power placed within my hands, I hesitated a long time concerning the manner in which I should employ it. Although I possessed the capacity of bestowing animation, yet to prepare a frame for the reception of it, with all its intricacies of fibers, muscles, and veins, still remained a work of inconceivable difficulty and labor. I doubted at first whether I should attempt the creation of being like myself, or one of simpler organization. But my imagination was too much exalted. Well, let's not miss the wisdom that is found here, right? When our imagination gets ahead of us, when our thoughts, things that could be, might be, should be, the way we would like to idealize the world, and we get out of the realm of what is, and this imagination of his pulled him towards something. But my imagination was too much exalted by my first success to permit me to doubt of my ability to give life to an animal as complex and wonderful as man. A little bit later on, he continues, says, no one can conceive the variety of feelings which bore me onwards like a hurricane in the first enthusiasm of success. Life and death appeared to me ideal bounds, which I should first break through and pour. Now listen to this. This is biblical imagery here, but this coming from a man. And to pour a torrent of light into our dark world. This is what Isaac alluded to, right? He is beginning to picture himself to be a god. And the question Jesus asks in the New Testament is this: what good is it for someone? What does it profit a man to gain the whole world, but to forfeit his soul? What good is it to have all of this knowledge? What good is it to have all of these abilities? What good is it to have all of these things that your imagination it dreams up if it costs you your soul? You see, there's a trade-off. The acquisition of knowledge, Ben talked about this, right, in class, it's trade-offs. You can't have it all. But how is Victor's mindset? That he is going to pour a torrent of light into our dark world through the creation of a being. A new species would bless me as its creator and source.
Is this still on page 55?
This is on 55. Yeah. Now again, hear these words pouring from a man's mouth. How flippantly these words come out. How casually, how familiar they are. And again, I get that this, right, this is not real. We're not reading a historical novel of something that happened. But let's identify the mindset of one who pursues knowledge, understanding above relationship. And how that affects us in the context of relationship, right? Is it better when you're dealing with a friend or somebody who has a difference than you? Is it better to be right? Is that more important to you? Or is the relationship better? And maybe in those times it's better to refrain from being right and just relating to that person. Sometimes it's better to not say anything. Sometimes it's wise to refrain. Now sometimes, no, certainly you want to speak and be honest. But even in that, right, the way that we do it should be relational, loving, right? The Bible says to speak the truth in love. Right? You can't just have the truth without love. That's harsh. And you can't have love without truth. That enables. They both need to work together. He continues, a new species would bless me as its creator and source. Many happy and excellent natures would owe their being to me. No father could claim the gratitude of his child so completely as I should deserve theirs. So not only does he see himself as a creator, but now he's using familiar family terminology like father. Pursuing these reflections, I thought that if I could bestow animation upon lifeless matter, I might, in process of time, although I now found it impossible, renew life where death had apparently devoted the body to corruption. It says a little bit later down, I seem to have lost all soul or sensation, but for this one pursuit, this singularly minded pursuit. 1 Corinthians 8:1 says this, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. What we see happening here is pretty straightforward. He's become so enamored with himself and what he can do that he has lost all relational context to the world around him. Yeah, Hattie.
What was the verse again?
That is 1 Corinthians 8:1. Knowledge puffs up. Love builds up. Victor has lost relational connection to the world. So why do we have a lot of the meetings, conversations that we have? Why is the focus so much on what it means to be a son of God? What it means to be in the house of God, as a family of God? Those are all relational contexts. All of them. When Jesus referred to God, he referred to him as Abba, Father. And that terminology is more affectionate and endearing. There was still a reverence and a respect, right? We never see that Jesus falters in this way. Jesus is always respectful, always mindful. When his earthly parents, right, Mary and Joseph, when they lose him, they go away for a few days, they realize he's lost, and so they go back and they find him in the temple. Jesus isn't freaking out. I'm sure, being a parent, I think Nicole and I lost Kayla for like 5 minutes in a Walmart in Montana once, and there was panic. And so as a parent, I'm sure there was panic. And what does Jesus say? He goes, didn't you know I would be about my Father's business? There's a relational context and understanding. You see, you guys, we have to, and I say have to, like meaning it really should not be a negotiation for you. You have to see the value of the relationships God has given you as being preeminent and a priority in your life. The imaginations that you have are secondary to the relationships you have. the desires you have should be secondary to the relationships that God has given you. Our desires, by the way, should come into context with the world and the people around us. Our wants should be secondary to the relationships that God has given us. The emotions, right, that go through us should be secondary. And so when people offend us, people hurt us, people agitate us, we need to do what? We need to understand that we are created to be relational beings. We know that because when God created Adam, we talked about this last week, Adam began to look out on creation and see, man, all of these things have a like in kind, all of these things, but I don't. And what the lesson Adam should have learned there is that God was there with him and for him. And yet Adam asked for what? For a companion. And God gave him somebody who was suitable, a helper for him, gave him Eve, right? And that context of that relationship was significant. They were meant to be co-heirs in cooperation. Not one exalted over the other. And yet we live in a culture currently, that demonstrates the very same evil here that Victor, a fictional character, is warning us against. I want to ask you, the things that you think you need in your life, I want to ask you, are those things that have been revealed to you by your Heavenly Father? Or are they merely imaginations you have held up? And again, I'm not trying to rain on anyone's parade here. I'm really not. Because what I know to be true is that the Father wants to give you good things. He wants to bless you, right? Does God, as creator, does he not want to give you the very best? Does he not have the very best plan for your life, for my life? Has he not considered all things when he created you? Now let's juxtapose this to Victor's experience, right? The hubris that is found in the heart of Victor points to us a misunderstanding of God. I don't think Mary Shelley was intending this, by the way. I think she was secular in her understanding of things. But there is a tremendous amount of wisdom that she has in writing, because there is something that is being told here, and through Victor's lip, is that he should be a father to his creature. And so as we close up chapter 4, what happens?
The monster, you can't find the monster in his apartment.
Okay. Any other thoughts? We don't see the monster, right?
I was gonna say.
Not that far yet. But as we're closing down, what's happening towards the very end? There's this battle still going on within Victor's heart.
I have a thought. Wasn't he starting to get like really anxious about everything? Like towards the end?
Mm-hmm.
So he was like, I was getting pale and like I would jump at every single tiny noise.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just get really anxious.
Yeah.
Thought that was interesting.
Yes. And so what's interesting again, and these are really easy things to miss, but when we want to kind of go back to the story of Walton, that's meant to ground us in this story to be real, right? So what did Walton say when he went out on his journeys to the North Pole? What did he want? He was looking for a friend. Why?
I feel lonely.
What's that? He felt lonely, yeah. He felt lonely. He wanted somebody to share in the experience with him. And so we see Victor's anxieties and all of those things begin to happen, right? The questioning, all of the stuff that's going on in Victor's mind and heart and that is being solidified in him is happening separate and apart from what? Any human contact. Why is there anxiety? Why is there doubt? Why is there fear? Why is there trepidation? Why is there arrogance? Why is there hubris? Well, I would contend that all of those, all negative emotions, emanate from man getting outside of the context of proper relationship. What I've come to understand and realize in my life, the times where I am most unsettled, it is because I am out of relational context, first with God, and second with those whom God has placed in my life. And so the best way to resolve those issues is not by trying to figure out, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. It's connection to people. It is not good for man to be alone. That's like Bible 101. Why? Because when we go alone, we think what we think, we feel what we feel, we desire what we desire, and there's no relational filter through it. But how many of us have had the friend or the person in our life where we had this really good idea and we share it with them and maybe they didn't share in the same enthusiasm that we had. And maybe we were even hurt or offended when they said, I don't know about that. But once we really gave consideration to what they had to say, we came alongside of thinking, well, maybe they're right. See, ultimately what Victor needs here is he needs the counterbalance of relationship. And I think in some sense, what we're experiencing with Victor is he is kind of abandoned that which he's been given to create something that he can idealize, that he can have the perfect relationship, everything that he imagines it could be. And that's problematic, right? Because if you give life to anything, it doesn't mean that you get to control it. See, you guys are not in a position of life, right? No one, you guys eventually will have kids. You can ask your parents if you guys do. Well, you guys probably know this. Do you guys always do the things that your parents ask of you? Did your personality turn out exactly like they thought it would? No, there's no anticipating all of the things that can come up. And so what we see, right, is the acquisition of knowledge. He had all this power, this ability to do things, and yet he didn't think through the simplest questions of how am I going to care for or nurture? How am I going to relate? It's easy to say things like, I'm going to be a father, and they'll bless me because I created them. It's a whole other thing to begin to put into practice what that means. So this week, as you read through chapters 5 and 6, I want you to have these a few discussions with your parents. The first one will be this, and it is on the Google Drive document that I shared. It's asking this question: just because you can do something, does it mean that you should? I would really encourage you guys to think through, like, if you can find a really practical, like in your life, this is something that I think I could do. Maybe use that as an object lesson to say, but is that something that I should do? Right? Because we know just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. This is the struggle of adulthood. I could do this. I could do that. I could do that. That's not bad. And again, I'm not. What I want us to have the context of it is when are the things. Well, let's ask it this way, and you guys can frame this out with your parents. When are the times that you should do something? That are absolutes. I should do that. Hattie.
Your parents tell you to.
Your parents tell you, yeah, obedience, right? But let's go even deeper than our parents, because our parents represent something, or should represent something for us, right? Because your parents are earthly examples of teaching you obedience, but there's something deeper beyond that.
God.
The Father, right? The things that the Lord reveals. And again, not reveals, see, the way that God works is he doesn't just let Justin in on the secret of Justin's life. What has God given me? He's given me a wife. He's given me kids. He's given me brothers like Andy and Ben, and Tim and Emmanuel, who speak wisdom, insight, people to pray with, people to wrestle things with. And so I am I have the great benefit of what? Relationship with others. Relationship with people who see things the way that I see them in the sense of what is important, but don't see everything the way that I see, because that offers, different perspectives and mindsets that can help me shift when I need to shift. There's an openness and a flexibility that needs to be there, right? And so my life can be healthier because I have the proper relational context. My life has never been better because I was smarter than other people. And I have pursued and acquired a ton of knowledge, a ton of it. And I can confidently say that so much of the knowledge that I've gained is garbage. It's useless without the relational effect of one another, without the context of those people whom God has given me. None of it matters. What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and yet forfeit his soul? The second question is this, is why is regret such a powerful emotion and experience? And if you don't know what regret means, I think you probably do, but I would encourage you to explore that. Have you ever regretted something? Maybe it's something you said, maybe it's something you did, maybe it's something you didn't do.
It's why is regret
Such a powerful emotion and experience. And again, this is all written down here for you. But again, I'm hoping that some of this is generating some really good, positive conversation around things, because I think it will help us flesh out a little bit the story of Frankenstein itself, because we see that we're going to have to come to a pretty clear idea of who is Victor. So I'm going to show of hands. Do we see we can see Victor one of two ways. I'm going to give you two options. Do we see Victor as sympathetic, somebody who we kind of pity and feel bad for because he can't figure it out, or do we see Victor as somebody who is willfully being blind and is more of a negative figure? So how many of you see him as more sympathetic? Own your vote. you don't have to be. Okay, why?
I would say, I feel like I feel more sympathy for him, because not only like how you were saying with his mom dying, I think pain and sorrow can drive you to do very certain things without thinking about it. So with this whole, like maybe him proving that if he could have bring something to life if he and his mom didn't have to die, I think I feel more sympathy with him there, because I don't know if it's necessarily him, it's the emotions that are driving him to do that, if that makes sense.
Andy.
I think because he's been lonely, and that makes you very self-centered when you're only around yourself all the time. And with his mom dying, I think obviously it's not right to think that you can create something living, but he's feeling like sadness of his mom dying and trying to prevent that for other people who knows.
Yeah.
Something I wrote down is that Victor doesn't want relationship, even though he can get it.
Why do you think that is?
It was something that I read, and another thing that I read is the monster wants relationship but can't get it.
Okay, you might be a little bit ahead of us. Yeah, probably. That's all right. Relationship, right? That's the most important thing. As we read these next two chapters, something's going to take place. It's the realization or the culmination of his desires. And I want you guys to make a very clear, like as you read it, like, and the reason why we're reading things like only two chapters instead of just like blowing through a bunch of chapters is I want you guys to take a very measured approach to what you're reading. Really try to understand what is happening and what is going on. To really consider things from all angles, because these are pretty significant events that are happening. but I want you to think about regret in your life. I want you to think about regret as it's going to play itself out in Victor's life. I want you to think about what is that regret going to create, right? Victor has in many ways, to wrap it all up, Victor has stepped away from this idea of needs, of physiological safety, love, and belonging. And he's really primarily focused on his own self-esteem. That was, remember, the fourth one. And then self-actualization. And this is where the hierarchy of needs or secular pursuits can get us a little bit off, because the top of the pyramid here, these are things that should be empowered by the Spirit of God as sons of God, right? We're loved and encouraged. We belong as sons of God so that our esteem is built on what? Not our own self, not self-esteem. It's Christ esteem. It's son esteem, being esteemed in God's house, properly understood. And it's not self-actualization. It should be son actualization, where we begin to walk as sons. Now, Victor has stepped away from the relational context here. And because he has, if you step out of relationship, where do you find love and belonging? You can't. Because again, what has been woven into man's heart is a desire for fellowship, relationship, connection. First to God, then to those around him. It is not good for man to be alone. So let's continue to explore these themes. Everything that we've built up in these last few weeks has been foundational. And so keep those things at the back of our mind as you're reading. He's telling the story to Walton. Walton's role is a significant one. Imagine yourself, maybe you could be like Walton. You're hearing it for the first time. Oh, I wonder what that means. I wonder where he's going with it. Ask yourself questions. Write those things down. Have those conversations with one another. The last assignment for this week is, I know we have 11 people, so I'll need one group of 3, but I need everyone to find a partner that you could be talking to the book about over the week. And then one group, you can have 3 people. And so I'm going to trust that you guys can resolve that yourselves. And then we'll leave it at that. All right? Any questions? Yes, sir.
So do we let you know who our partner is?
Yes, please. Yep. And you guys could probably take a few minutes to do that now. All right. That is it. Thank you, guys.
Thank